What's up, everybody, and welcome here to my Premier League predictions for match day 16 on this weekend on this video. My official prediction on match day 16 of the Premier League between Chelsea and also Everton. Big matchup, of course, on the weekend between the two sides. Both teams are looking for 3 points. Both teams are looking for something in the matchup. As Everton, very good start in terms of the last few games of the season. They've beaten Bournemouth 1-0, and also they did beat Nottingham Forest at home last weekend 3-0 in their matches. As for Chelsea, they're in poor form. They drew to Arsenal, they lost to Leeds 3-1, and they drew 0-0 from last weekend to Bournemouth. Not much in that game, and obviously Chelsea are now drift away from the second position now, and they've drifted away from the title chances now because they are obviously were 5 points behind Arsenal, but now they're currently 8 points behind Arsenal, who are currently sitting top of the Premier League. So they're in a little bit of a poor form so far at the moment, Chelsea. But as of the prediction between Chelsea and Everton at Stamford Bridge, I do think that Chelsea will pick up a win here. They have to, on paper. They have to get a win after a few defeats and points dropped as well in the Premier League. They've got to try and bounce back. Everton done amazingly well, of course. You can't even question how they've been so far in the last few games. But since Chelsea's at Stamford Bridge, and since Chelsea have to get a result in this matchup, I'm going to go for a win for Chelsea. I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for Chelsea, and I think Cole Palmer will be on the score sheet and win the game for the Chelsea in the matchup on the weekend. Now, my official prediction on Anfield on the weekend's game, as we do have, is Liverpool taking on against Brighton. Liverpool obviously need to get back in winning ways in the Premier League after drawing to Leeds 3-3 and not in very good form at the moment. Obviously, Liverpool did win to West Ham a few weeks back 2-0 away from home. Did very well, of course, in the Champions League during the week against Inter Milan. A goal from Sabitzer. Dominic Sabitzer by a penalty for him to score the only goal in the late minutes of the game to win Liverpool the matchup against Inter Milan. But they do play now back in the Premier League this weekend against Brighton Hove Albion. Well, Brighton, however, in their perspective, they obviously did actually get a point over West Ham 1-1 last Sunday. So they have to try and bounce, of course, back into a result maybe. So I think Liverpool will be a bit too much for maybe for Brighton. You never know because Liverpool not being in good form at home this season. So you never know how Brighton will show up, of course, on Saturday's game. But in my perspective, since obviously Liverpool drew 3-3 the Leeds last weekend, I do think as they're at home as well, and since a lot of teams go to Anfield and get results over Brighton, especially when Sunderland drew 1-1 against Liverpool a few weeks back, I do think that Liverpool will pick up a win, I think. I'm going to probably go... even though Liverpool being in bad form, yeah, I think they have to try and do something, of course, over Brighton. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for Liverpool. I don't think Brighton will get any goals in this game. I do think that would be a boring game. Liverpool play poor throughout the matchup, but Liverpool do get the 3 points and clinch the 3 points over Brighton. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for Liverpool on Saturday. Now we move on now to half-5 kickoff on Saturday between Burnley and also Fulham at Turf Moor. We know that obviously Burnley are currently in the relegation zone, not looking great obviously in the Premier League. Obviously from last weekend, they lost 2-1 to Newcastle. Was a disappointing result for them. However, for Fulham, they almost tried and got a point over Palace down in obviously in West London at home at Craven Cottage, but Palace scored a great goal at the end by Mark Gahey to win Palace for 3 points in that matchup. So it was a big disappointing loss for Fulham. And I know that Fulham, of course, are currently having a little bit of a shaky results the last few weeks as well. I know that Fulham, of course, are now points adrift away from the relegation draw. They could drop back into it, they could do Fulham. So you never know how they'll produce in terms of this game over Burnley on the weekend's game at half-5. Personally, in my prediction between Burnley and Fulham for tomorrow, and even since I've said Fulham have not been as great as well. I know they picked up some wins as well, especially beating Sunderland a few weeks back as well was massive for them as well. Probably the biggest result of the season to beat Sunderland at Craven Cottage. But they do play Burnley away from home though. Burnley are not being great, not picking up results, but as I never seen Burnley pick up anything, of course, in the last few weeks. I do fancy Burnley trying to get something over Fulham. I do think that Burnley might get something over Fulham. I don't really think that Burnley will win the game at Turf Moor on Saturday, but I do personally think it'll be a draw between Fulham and Burnley. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Both teams get a point out of each other. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 between the two teams at 5:30 on Saturday. Now we move on now to our next predictions, of course, of the Premier League, as we do have an 8 o'clock kickoff at the Emirates. Is my team Arsenal will take on the strugglers of Wolverhampton Wanderers, and Wolves cannot get any wins so far because they've been absolutely poor throughout the whole season. Only 2 points they've picked up throughout the whole season. And I don't really think that Wolves will be anywhere in terms of safety, I don't think, now in the Premier League, because there's a lot of teams now above them, like West Ham, Forest, Leeds. They're points away from Wolverhampton Wanderers. And even getting Rob Edwards from Middlesbrough is probably a big, let's say, gamble for Wolves. Also for sacking Victor Pierre. I think they should have sacked Victor Pierre in the first place, but they should have got an experienced manager to try and bring them out of the relegation zone. But I don't think Wolves have got any quality in their team. Also affects Wolves, I think, in terms of being safe for this season. I think the Wolves players have not been as great. I don't think they defend very, very well. They can't even score any goals. I know they scored 1 goal against Man United on Monday night and they lost 4-1 that game. But however, they cannot score any goals whatsoever. They've been very, very poor. They've been very, very poor. So honestly, in terms of that, and since we have to get a result, of course, after losing to Aston Villa from last weekend, I've got to say that Villa really done well against us. They really tore us apart in the game. We scored a goal back in the matchup when we were losing or trailing by 1-0 to Aston Villa, but then Brendia scored a late goal for Aston Villa to win them the game and clinch them the 3 points. But we have to get back in winning ways also. We have to beat Wolves, and we have to. I think we will do, of course, and we have to in this matchup, obviously. So I'm going to go for a prediction of a 3-0 win for Arsenal. I think we'll probably win 3 goals in this game. Did very, very well against Club Brugge on Wednesday in the Champions League, but also in the Premier League, I do think we should pick up a big win in this game. So I'm going to go for a 3-0 win as my prediction between Arsenal and Wolves. Now we move on now to Sunday's matches. We've got Crystal Palace and they take on against Manchester City. Big win, of course, of Palace away from home to Fulham a few weeks back. Obviously, from Sunday, sorry, I apologise. Sunday, not a few weeks back, but Fulham, of course, on Sunday. Big goal from Mark Gahey to win them the game. Palace, of course, sort of back in winning ways now in the Premier League. They are currently sitting in the top 4 of the Premier League. The top 4, the table does not lie one bit whatsoever. They overtaken Chelsea in 4th place. And Palace have been amazing, they've been this season. We know that as a matter of fact. But they do play against Man City, however. A team also is chasing us in this title race now. I do think that City have been brilliant in the last few games, beating Sunderland 3-0. They sneakily beaten Leeds 3-2 at the Etihad Stadium as well. It was a big win for them as well also. So they are in winning ways. They are Pep Guardiola's team. Back to winning ways. They're really chasing us, of course, behind us by 2 points. I think with Chelsea's game, I think for Man City's game on Sunday, on paper they should win this game against Palace, and I think they should do, in my opinion. But however, Palace have been great also, currently 4th in the Premier League. And I'm not going to be biased because I'm an Arsenal fan and, Man City are only 2 points behind us. But I do fancy Palace as well might get something, though, against Man City. I do see a possibility that Man City might get a victory over Palace. but I don't think there will. I think it'll be a draw. I think Mateta will score a penalty, and I think Phil Foden will score the only goal for Man City to make sure this game ends as a draw. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw at Selhurst Park as my prediction on Sunday. Now we move on now to my prediction between Nottingham Forest and Tottenham Hotspur. Big matchup, by the way, between Forest and also Spurs. You know, Forest are in good form in terms of what they've done in the Europa League, of course. 1-2-1 to Utrecht in the Thursday's game. Okay, obviously Forest did actually lose 3-0 to Everton from last weekend away from home. But a massive win, of course, during the week. Also, they won 1-0 against Nottingham Forest. Against Wolverhampton Wanderers, in the matchup. Obviously, Forest did actually pick up a big away victory over Wolves a few weeks back. So they are having their moments, Sean Dyche, to make the team hard to beat at the back. Defensively, they've been great. You know, he's really making Forest hard to beat at the back. And I think that's why, you know, Forest are now in, they're saying, a good form slightly outside the relegation drop. As Tottenham obviously travelled, of course, all the way to the City Ground, I do think that with Spurs' results in the last few games, you know, picked up a win against Brentford, a big win over Brentford during the weekend, and obviously they did draw 2-2 to Newcastle, and even before that as well, they actually lost 2-1 to Fulham. So they were back in winning ways, of course, however, against Brentford in their last Premier League matchup. But since obviously they're away from home, and since Forest obviously are the home team, and I don't really think that Spurs will get anything in this game. I don't think. I think in terms of how Forest play, and you know, Sean Dyche wants to give the home advantage for Forest, of course, with his defence, make it hard to feed at the back, you know, be ultra defensive as well. I do think that Forest will obviously might pick up something in this game, I think. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do, actually. So, and I think that that young Brazilian striker, I do really like the guy, actually. He does score a lot of goals since he joined Forest in the transfer window in the summer. And I think he will score the only goal for Forest in that matchup. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for Forest over Tottenham as my prediction at the City Ground on Sunday. Now we move on to the real business of the weekend, and probably the biggest games in the whole of the weekend. It's the East. It's a Tyre East. Was it? Now we move on now to the biggest game of the whole of this match day. It is the North East derby between Newcastle United and Sunderland. You know, Sunderland have been absolutely great. Now we move on now to my official predictions on Sunday between two biggest teams in terms of a rivalry. Probably the biggest games of this match day, personally, in my opinion. It's the Tyre. Now we move on now to the biggest games and the biggest games of match day 16 of this weekend. We do have the North East derby, as Sunderland will host Newcastle United. Sunderland have to try and definitely try and show Newcastle what they're really about, because Sunderland have been very good this season. They've been absolutely great. They've been one of the best, the real proper dark horses in the Premier League. And for them to go from being promoted from the Championship, get to the Premier League, and then doing so well during the Premier League season, they are in the top 6 of the Premier League. And they've been absolutely magnificent. You know, they've been very, very hard and difficult to beat them at times as well. They do play against their rivals Newcastle, and these two teams have not met head-to-head in the Premier League ever since when Newcastle got relegated in 2016. That was the last time that these two teams played each other in the Premier League. I think they did play each other in the FA Cup also a few years back, and then Newcastle did win 3-0 at the Stadium of Light Stadium. But, however, this Sunderland team's a different Sunderland team compared to that game, and I do think Sunderland will make it hard for Newcastle. They have to make it hard for Newcastle because that's a rivalry. Probably one of the biggest games that Sunderland fans be look forward to all season is this matchup, of course, on Sunday, in this Tyre derby. But personally, as obviously Newcastle also, they've changed quite a lot as well since Sunderland were last in the Premier League. When Newcastle got relegated in 2016, obviously they came back up. Sunderland went straight down to the Championship. Sunderland went down to League One. However, Newcastle had a few seasons under Mike Ashley, surviving the drop in the Premier League, and then the owners of Saudi Arabia took over and purchased Newcastle in 2021, and they've created Newcastle into a top team, into a Champions League team, and also a team who actually won the League Cup from this year in February from last season. And under Eddie Howe, they've been a very, very different sort of team ever since when Sunderland were last in the Premier League. And this will be a very interesting game also for Sunderland, in fact. But in my honest prediction in this matchup, though, between the two sides, and since Newcastle are looking forward to this game also, especially against Sunderland, I do think it might come down to a draw between the two sides. I think Sunderland will score first, and I think Sunderland will be leading 1-0. But I've got a feeling, I do really like this striker as well, and he's in my fantasy team as well, Waldemade. I think Waldemade will also be on the score sheet, also for Newcastle United, to make it 1-1 to wrap up the game at the Stadium of Light Stadium. So, in my perspective about this prediction, I'm going to go for a draw, 1-1, as my prediction between Sunderland and Fulham. So I'm going to go for Sunderland 1, Newcastle 1, as my official prediction in the Tyre derby. Now we move on now to 2 o'clock kickoff again between West Ham United and also Aston Villa. Both sides are really looking forward to this game, especially for West Ham United. They're still in a real bad drop, obviously, at the moment in the Premier League. They are obviously outside of the relegation zone currently, and they have to try and get more wins, obviously, under their belt, and they probably could do against Aston Villa. Obviously, Villa, on the other hand, they've been very, very good. They've been this season, very extraordinarily. Both teams are in different ends of the table, but it still will be a good game to watch though, because West Ham will be up for it as well, and Villa will definitely be up for it, because Villa did very well from last week to win 2-1 to Arsenal in a late last kick of the game by a goal from Emiliano Buendia in that matchup, and that won Villa the game. And now Villa are currently 3 points behind from Arsenal in 3rd place in the Premier League. This game to be difficult though for Villa though, because you got to understand, when teams are like done amazingly well, and he has transformed Villa into a team not looking great at the start of the season, into a team now are challenging now at the top of the table now. I don't think even Villa's going to probably get a win in this game, I don't think, because it's still tough. The Premier League's still tough. Anyone can beat anybody on their day, but I do fancy West Ham picking up a point in this game against Villa, because obviously West Ham are at home. They're in a bad rut at the moment. They had some results as well under Nuno Espirito Santon there and in, drawing to Man United 1-0 at Old Trafford, picking up a point over that game as well. West Ham United, of course, picked up a draw over Brighton on Sunday from last week. So they have picked up a couple of points in only like 1 point in each game. They are currently sitting in the relegation or outside the relegation drop at the moment. So I do think that Villa will not get the win, because West Ham got a lot to fight for in this game. So I'm going to go for a draw, even though Villa have been so magnificently great, of course, in the top 3 points behind from Arsenal. But I do think that West Ham will make it difficult for Aston Villa. So I'm going to go for a draw, and I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between the two sides at the London Stadium on the weekend. Now we move on now between Brentford and also Leeds United at the G-Tech Stadium on Sunday. Big matchup, by the way, for both sides, especially for Brentford. They lost to Arsenal, they lost to Spurs, and they are dropping down the table slightly. But they do play Leeds United, though. Been so good in the last 2 games so far in the Premier League. They were actually thinking about sacking Daniel Farke after the Chelsea game, but that win was a massive win for Leeds United to beat Chelsea during the week. They drew 3-3. A late goal from the Japanese forward Tanaka to get them the point out of that game against Liverpool at Ellen Road as well. 3-3 was a big point against one of the biggest teams in English football. and they really picked up 4 points in the last 2 games. It's brilliant for Leeds United. But they do play Brentford, however, are in a bit of a losing rut a little bit now after losing to Spurs and Arsenal in the last 2 games away from home. But as Brentford they've been good, they've been this season. They've not been the best, but they've been good this season. They had their moments under their new manager, Keith Andrews, during the season. I know Brentford's style of football has not really been drifted off at all since they've got a new manager in, obviously, with Keith Andrews. Obviously, under Thomas Frank, they've been good, very good playing football when he was manager for Brentford. But since he left, and since they got a new manager in, a set-piece coach now, promoted into a first-team manager, he has not changed nothing for Brentford, and their identity really stays exactly the same. But as of this game against Leeds on 4:30 kickoff on Sunday, I do think Brentford might get the win over Leeds. Leeds having their good moments so far, picking up 4 points in their last 2 games. But I don't think they're going to pick up another point again, I don't think, in this matchup. I think they'll have a little blip, I think they're going to have in this matchup. So I'm going to go for a win for Brentford. So I'm going to go for a Brentford win, 2-0 as my prediction at the G-Tech Stadium in West London as my official prediction between the 2 sides. Now we move on now to 8 o'clock kickoff match prediction at Old Trafford at 8 o'clock on Monday. It's Manchester United. They will host Bournemouth. We know how important this game will really be, obviously, for Man United. They've actually done okay. They've picked up a massive win against Wolves on Monday Night Football. They actually picked up, obviously, a point over West Ham in their last game before that. And then they picked up a big win over Crystal Palace. So they have picked up some form in the last few weeks, Ruben Amorim's side. And even they lost 1-0 to Everton at home at Old Trafford a few weeks back before that. But in the last 4 games, they have picked up 3 points, draws as well. Bit disappointing, though. Hit and misses, Man United have been, in terms of their results in the last few games. But they do play Bournemouth, though. They should win it on paper. And Bournemouth, however, also got to bear it in mind as well. They did draw to Chelsea 0-0 from last weekend as well. They even picked up, obviously, a big defeat over Everton 1-0 at home at the Vitality Stadium the week before that. And even Bournemouth, obviously, the game before that as well. They lost 3-2 to Sunderland as well. And they are in a losing rut now, Bournemouth. They were very good, they were. Punched above their weight, up in the top 5, the top 6 of the Premier League, but then they've drifted down a little bit, down the table slightly after, 4 poor defeats for them, apart from that draw against Chelsea from last weekend. But apart from that, they've picked up some poor form in the last few weeks. But as they're the team away from home, and since obviously Man United have been in good form also slightly as well, I don't really think that Man United will pick up a big win over Bournemouth on Monday Night Football. Since Bournemouth, of course, know that they are a little bit dropping down the table slightly now, I think they want to try and, make sure they go to Old Trafford and perform a shift over Man United, though. You got to understand, Man United are a very hit and miss team. They win games, they lose games, they draw games, they do, under Ruben Amorim. And they are doing okay. They're not doing as bad this season. I'm not going to dispute that. They've been very good. They've been, better than last season in comparison to this season, though. But I do think Bournemouth will probably get a goal in that matchup. And I do think Man United will also score as well. So I think that Brian Abremo for Man United will score the first goal to make it 1-0. But however, I think that Semenyo will be on the score sheet also for Monday Night Football to give them a point in that game. So my official prediction between Man United and Bournemouth is going to be a draw. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between the 2 sides as my official prediction of the Premier League for the end of match day 16. And that's going to be it, by the way, for my official predictions of the Premier League, of course. Great results, of course, across the Premier League of match day 16. And that's going to be all of it right here for my official predictions on this video. All the games have been predicted. All the games I've done already for match day 16. And if you like this video, go and give me a subscribe on my YouTube channel. Every week I do predictions for the Premier League, and I'll be doing match day 17 of my Premier League predictions also for next weekend in next week's video. But until then, from all of us here, Have a good one. Peace out, and thank you for watching.